swimming has given me a lot. Like I would not be living my dream right now of, living in the US. Like I recently applied for my green card. Just kind of like living the dream life for myself if it wasn't for swimming. So my pact with myself is just like I want to add to this community as much as I can. And I think that goes with that promise of like always studying and like always becoming better, becoming a better coach, becoming a better leader, just in order to like add and leave my mark in the sport somehow. But mostly like, it's all about just sharing and like showing people that, thinking outside of the box, it's pretty possible and it's pretty easy and fun to do.
Take your marks.
Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by João Mescolote. João is a graduate assistant coach at Ball State University, recently also coached at Concordia University, and is also both a pro and a master swimmer, an ambassador for U.S. master swimming. And yeah, I'm stoked to have you on. So thanks for hopping on, João.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really exciting. I love sharing, talking about swimming, anything swimming at all. So I'm really excited for this.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll start by asking you, you're coaching right now. You're a graduate assistant coach at Ball State, and you're also a professional swimmer, master swimmer. So you're kind of balancing both. You're swimming, but you're also coaching. So I guess how do you kind of balance both? Your own desire to continue to better yourself as a swimmer, and then maybe how does that translate to your coaching, or how does that help your coaching at Ball State?
I think it goes like both ways, like you said, like it complements each other. You'd be surprised with the amount of things I actually do. It's not just those two. So I'm coaching. I'm coaching at Ball State. I coach at a local club here. I do have a lot of online athletes all over the world, from club swimmers to master swimmers, so like wide range of skill level. And at the same time, I play around with swimming professionally and swimming in the Masters Federation as well. So doing a lot of things. I think they all sort of like complement each other in a way that a lot of things that I end up trying, I coach myself, so a lot of the things that I end up trying on myself, new equipment, training methods, like a different way of doing something that I've never done before. I end up testing on my athletes as well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, just because of that skill level difference. But I think it's a really fun way to figuring everything out, especially as a young coach. So it's really fun. It becomes, at points I have to say no to different things. I have to take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to do this meet myself here because that weekend, I have to go coach club, or that weekend I have a dual meet with my college team. And so it would become too difficult to do both. But I try to do my best. Obviously, my priority number one is Ball State and being a college coach here at Ball State. And then second priority becomes, my club swimmers, my online athletes. And then after that, that's why I say as a pro athlete, I'm just having fun with it because that's just sort of like my hobby. It's not something I need to do per se. I get to do it. So kind of like try to always maintain that element of fun with everything I do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's cool to me because you're like living your passion. Like you're swimming, daily, and you're continuing to, to improve your own swimming. But then at the same time, you're also on the coaching side of things. And as someone who's a coach now and still likes to practice swimming, I feel that it gives me such a different perspective, coaching on a day-to-day basis with a range of, athletes, and then being able to think about the different drills that I'm giving them, or the different, motion patterns in the water, that gives me a better like understanding of what I'm actually trying to convey over to the athletes, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's cool.
Yeah, I know. And that's exactly what it is. Like, I think I swam from 2014 to 2018 in college, and from that period to now, so much has changed. It doesn't seem like it, but within this past 5 years, we've discovered like so many new different training methodologies, as well as new equipment available for training, or new usage of different equipment. So it is cool that I still get to, be in somewhat of like a good swimmer shape, that I can get to in the water and try out different things in order to understand exactly how my athletes feel. And my deal with myself is, it's basically, I'm going to keep doing this until it's healthy, both, physically and mentally for myself. Obviously, like, I'm a single guy, don't have a girlfriend, so it's like I have a lot of free time, so it's fun for me. The moment that, obviously, like, I plan to one day have a family, have kids, and all of that, and those things add up at some point. So I know that once that happens, I'm probably going to be taking steps back from, spending too much time in the pool and like doing stuff myself. So I just try to roll with it now, understand, learn from it, and just kind of like always, have fun with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love it. And that's a good perspective to have, because, to your earlier point, like, it's, you kind of have to just look at your priorities, or what you're prioritizing. And like you said, you have time now, so you can start to, prioritize your coaching and your swimming, and
Yeah.
you have a lot of free time. But like you said, at some point that could change. So
Yeah,
yeah, kind of taking it with a grain of salt and appreciating it, I think it's cool.
for sure.
Well, good. Well, so you talked about, a lot has changed, or at least, definitely several things have changed in sort of the swimming world, even in the coaching training world. So from your own experience, like as a swimmer, even as a college swimmer, from 2014 to 2018, and sort of what you're, seeing now, what you're learning about, and maybe what you're just implementing as a coach yourself. What has changed, and like what are you sort of implementing in your own coaching? Because I know I checked out your social media page, and you're very, it seems like, big on the sprint revolution, and just having people do a lot of more fast paced training, resistance based training, and also just like drill skill technique building, doing things with a purpose. So yeah, just talk to me about that.
Cool. Yeah. So actually, this is a really good opportunity to kind of like put how my brain operates out there, just because sometimes I think social media doesn't do justice to the amount of information that I put out. Some people think I'm, crazy for the way like I express, the way that my brain operates. But basically, I came up in a sprint background. I'm a 50 freestyler, 100 freestyler, 50 fly, 100 fly. So pure sprint. Like, I was the top sprint guy who probably didn't need as much yardage as I did growing up. So like, I highly relate to the whole sprint revolution movement. I joke with Brett all the time. We ended up becoming good friends through social media, and yes, like I do have some ideas that are very similar to what's been going on, as far as that end of the spectrum of like, all right, like, hey, sprinters, maybe we're looking at everything wrong. And one of the things that excites me the most about all of this is learning and studying and understanding what can be done different, rather than doing more of the same old. Uh, one promise that I made myself when I got back into the swimming world and started coaching was basically, I need to stay in touch with studying. Like, right now I'm a grad assistant, so I'm still getting my master's degree, and I still have like assignments, and I pretty much forced to study. But one thing I will never let go of is reading books, researching, and understanding information, just because I think it's an ever evolving environment. And like I said, like, to me, I think some of the main things that have changed from, let's say, 2016 till now, it's, evolves around like recovery, sleep, like just the training methodologies in itself, the way we operate in the water. It's a lot different. This year has been a great year for my learning process. Thankfully I'm able to reach some of the best athletes in the world and coaches in the world, and I've been drilling them with questions, weekly. Like I've been talking to Ken McAvoy. I'm recently like became business partners with Nick Santos, which is, someone that was completely revolutionary in this area of, he broke a world record at 42 years old. So he was doing something different. And growing up in Brazil, I've seen him doing a lot of different stuff. So that's something that I think in coaching now, I try not to be afraid, especially being a young coach. There is some backlash every once in a while, but I think the position that I'm at as a grad assistant is sort of like the perfect position because not much responsibility falls on my plate. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say, but like I'm the guy on our pool deck that comes up with the crazy ideas, and I always either get shut down or I learn from it. And the learning could be through making a mistake, or it could be through, oh, okay, this actually worked, let's roll with it. So I think like a lot of the things that have changed from 2016 forward have to do with the things outside of the water, the controllables outside of the water. I think I joke with my athletes all the time. Like back when I was in college, we had one of those like massage guns for the whole team, and we all had to share it because it was super expensive. And nowadays, you can go, to Walmart and get one for $20, and like now everyone has one. So like, why are we not taking advantage of like those recovery tools? Like we like back in like 5-6 years ago, we didn't have all of that. And also like just like the tools that we're able to use in the water. I think there's a lot of changes going on as far as like how to use them. One example of that is resistance training. So for example, like using buckets like the Destro towers or just a normal power rack. I think the methodology that I came from like in college was sort of the idea of the more the better, which is not bad. It wasn't bad, but maybe we're shifting towards something where, okay, like, are we keeping the quality high? Like maybe quantity is not the answer, but like the quality of like the work that we're doing can matter a little more, like maybe spacing out the repetitions, giving a little more rest, working in the water very similarly to what we work in the weight room. And that's another area that I try to explore a lot as well, is how are the swimmers training in the weight room. I think that's something that has been changing a lot as well, and it's going to continue changing. So those are some of the main areas. Now, going back to the idea of like clarifying myself, I still think I was talking to my head coach this morning. We went out for breakfast. We were talking about this idea. It's like, I definitely do think that a guy like me that, I'm having fun with it. I swim masters, I swim professionally, just a 50 free, just a 50 fly. I think I could easily, and I have like obviously muscle maturity. I've been swimming for, over 20 years of my life. I've been exposed to different training methods. I've been exposed to a lot of things. I think a guy like me, yes, I do have the maturity to get by with swimming a little less yardage, a little more quality. But some of my athletes in club and in college, they don't necessarily have the same setup that I would have, for example. And obviously, like my sprinters here in college, they're not only doing the 50 free for fun, they're doing 50 free, 100 free, 200 free, 100 fly, 3-4 different relays in a setup where, the meet happens in 3 days. So maybe they do need to do a little more yardage in practice. And I think the fun for me is figuring it out, okay, like what's, what what's the minimum that we can do to maximize our potential, you know, instead of just kind of like throwing them a lot of different things and seeing what works. So it's mostly like that, like gas pedal with the clutch, like trying to find that middle ground, like that perfect spot. That involves my extremist idea on this end with, okay, like I still give credit to some of the stuff, you know, that we do.
Right.
And, you know, like the fun for me is trying to figure out like that sweet middle spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense because, like you said, at the college level, you know, you're expected to swim a lot, right? Like even if you're a sprinter, you go to a midseason invitational, for example, or even NCAA's or conference championships at the end of the year. And yeah, you might be doing the 50 free or the 100 free, but you're, you know, sometimes going to be doing that twice in one day. You're going to be doing a 50 free twice. You're going to be doing a relay at the end of the session. You're going to be stepping up on the blocks for your second, third event time and time again. And by the end of the meet, you could be doing over 1,000 yards of racing, even as a sprinter.
Right.
So I think that's a good point. Like, while, you know, it's nice to try to maybe individualize training when you have that availability, like you said, as someone who's been swimming for a long time now has their own sort of their own swim study going on and free time and muscle maturity. Like, you can absolutely explore you know, your own training methodologies comparatively to the likes of like Cam McAvoy and what he's doing.
Right.
But at the same time, it's not always translatable to, you know, age group
Right.
swimming or high school
And
or
I
even
think
college swimming.
the easiest way I explain to my sprinters is, and like if any of my friends in college will listen to this podcast, they'll laugh at me because like I was that guy that would be always complaining like, why are we doing all of this? Uh, but the easiest way, and it, like as a coach, like it clicked to understand why. But the easiest way that I found to explain to my sprinters is the same sharpness that you have in that first day of conference, you know, like those guys that are lining up for the 200 medley relay the first night, like you're feeling really sharp and you're swimming really fast. I want you to get to, you know, stay on that level of sharpness at the last day of the meet on that third 100 free of the day, right? Because like most conferences, the 100 free is on the last day. You do prelims, you do finals, and then it's the 4x1 free. So that's when they usually struggle, right? I'm like, the same sharpness here, like 4 days later, 5 days later, and your third 100 free of the day, that's when I need you the sharpest, you know, like on that last relay. And
Mm,
to be able to get there, you know, there's all this work that we need to be doing. And
right.
obviously that's for the college setup.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a good yeah, it's a good point though to make to those athletes for sure. Well, tell me this, like when it comes to, you know, experimenting with training at Ball State when you're working with these college athletes and even in your own sort of personalized coaching too and learning, like what are some of your favorite things to incorporate within training just to give, you know, different looks to your athletes and maybe make them think at a more cerebral level too, and just yeah, maximize, like you said, maximize their training in the water.
So one of the things that I take care of over here is the dry land training, which a lot of them have never been exposed to by the time they get here. So I do dry land and I work together with our strength and conditioning coach in order to put the program together, which is massive. Just because I know, you know, I come from a program where, you know, we had a football strength coach taking care of our swim team at LSU. And at times I would catch the distance swimmers doing the same work as me as a sprinter. And like, I never understood why. Obviously things have changed now. I've met their new strength and conditioning coach and he's awesome. I ask him a lot of information, like we, you know, exchange information all the time. But back then it was just, you know, it was just one of those situations where it was just another strength and conditioning coach from football who probably never had any experience in swimming before, just taking up a bunch of swimmers and, you know, let's get strong type of mentality, which in college I loved it, but because, you know, I'm a meathead, like I loved that. and I think in some ways worked very well for me as a sprinter. There's not much like not much room for error, but so that's the going into coaching. That's one of the things that I wanted to be able to tackle on is like I want to be that swim coach that understands exactly how to talk to these guys in the strength and conditioning environment. Just because I think one of the biggest issues is that gap in between both coaching staffs and not being able to communicate efficiently. So that's something that I like to try to tackle on. So that's something that I have full control here at Ball State. And one of the things I try to do is just like do a lot of different things that they probably have never seen before, but at the same time, I try to explain to them exactly what we're doing. So one of the coolest things was a couple of weeks ago, Brett Hawk had, some specialists on his podcast, Brian Kula and Tony Holler, who are strength and conditioning coaches that work with a lot of speed stuff. And they were talking about sprinting, like legitimately like running on land and how that helps you develop your speed in the water. And I've been doing that for about 2 years here at Ball State, and I had never heard of those guys. I think I followed one of them, but like everything I did just came from purely like me hitting the books and like thinking and like we share the same space as the track and field team here at Ball State. So I talk a lot with our head coach, the track and field head coach as well. So I was like, I think I'm going to start implementing this. It's a little different, but I want to try it out and see how that responds in the water. And it's been great. Like for the past 2 years, it's been awesome. So I was like, okay, like, we're going to keep it. And then this past month, I just, like got all this information from this like great coaches explaining a little more in depth of like the science behind it and everything behind it. So I was like, well, like we're on the right track. So I think that's one of the coolest things is it's kind of like helping my athletes understand, like, because a lot of them in the beginning were very like, okay, like, why are we sprinting? Like, why are we running? Like I even have like my distance people like doing 15-meter sprints on land. And they're like, why are we training like this? And then I sort of explain kind of like the science behind it. Like, and they don't ask it in like a disrespectful way of like, I don't think I need to do this. It's more like, what's the thought behind it? And I think that's awesome because then I get to share that information and then they like buy in very easily, which makes, like a lot more fun as well. And so like that's some of the stuff that like I end up doing a lot, as well as in the water. Like in the water, I like thankfully our head coach comes from a sprint background as well. He was the sprint coach for the Purdue men for about 11 years. But I think he coached from 2006 to 2017 at Purdue. So the things that he was doing was a lot different. And so like we always like, he said he needs a guy like me that's going to come in and like try to throw in like some of the most outrageous ideas in his head because he shuts me down like real quick. Like there's stuff that he's tried and then he goes, nope, right away. But there's stuff that he looks at me, he's like, okay, I see what you're thinking. I understand how your brain's thinking. Maybe let's try it like this, like let's tackle it this way or that way. And there's stuff that he's 100% like, it doesn't matter. Like one of the things that we've been doing this past 2 years is our top sprint day is mine. So basically I write the whole thing for the whole team. Just because he trusted like what, and I think like the cool thing was also that I don't just come up with these crazy ideas and just like, oh yeah, let's try this because it might work. I come up with the data. Like I look at books, I bring the references and I'm like, I think this might work. And then he goes, all right, like if you have like the idea to back it up, we try 1, 2, 3 times and it worked well. All right, like this is yours. So I'm like in charge of like the top sprint day, which is like the guys love it. They always ask me like, is it top sprint day today? Like, is it top sprint today? Because I make it like the way that we run it, it's like no yardage counting at all. Just basically, I just count the efforts. It's exactly the same outline of a track and field sprint workout. I just made it like a pool workout.
So what goes into that top sprint day? Like, what would a top sprint day look like for those swimmers?
So I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you ever watched the track and field workout?
I've never watched a track and field workout. I've certainly seen track, competitions, but never a workout.
So that's what I did. I went up to our track and field coach, sat with him, just watched him practice for a sprint day. They do about 40 to 50 minutes of just drills, kind of like warming up, kind of like same idea as us in swimming. We do like, hey, just do a meet warm up. But they basically do that, every day. They have a few pointers that they have to hit, like certain drills or certain things, but it's all on their own timing, like their own type of rest. They have like 40, 50 minutes to just hit those drills and get their body going pretty much. Then after that, the coach is just looking at total volume of sprints for that day. So for example, the coach, this is all based off, obviously this is based off our coach here. It's like, all right, like I want them to hit about 300 meters of sprints today. And that's broken down in, this many efforts. So he's just looking at efforts, and some of them, sometimes they'll go like a little extra. Sometimes they'll do like a 50-meter effort, or sometimes they'll just go a bunch of starts, like block starts, kind of like same concepts that we do, like working with a little PAP, a little resistance, contrast training, sort of like wearing a parachute like right before your main sprint set to kind of like get a little more of the muscle recruitment. But basically after that, 1 hour of warming up, they just have their number of sprints that they have to hit within an hour. So basically this one day that I watched, it was like they have 20 bouts of sprint and they have a full hour to hit it. So if they need 2 minutes rest, if they need 5 minutes rest, it's on them. Like they know they're, they just go around or they just stay static. Like they can do whatever they want pretty much. But whenever they're going for that 10 meter, if they're doing however many steps, if they're doing 7 steps, it has to be the most perfect 7 steps that they're taking, right? So then I'm like, what if we did that in swimming, dude? Like, why are we looking at yardage? Like, or like a top sprint, not just, like there's sprint resistance, there's power, just like for developing top sprint, initial sprint, going the fastest you can go, how are we training for that in swimming? And the truth is that most programs aren't. Like they're just doing a couple of 25s fast here and there, but you're not. I've talked to too many coaches. I don't know many programs that are separating one session a week to work on pure sprint without, being concerned about yardage. So then what we're doing in top sprint day, like Jay gave me the green light. So I came in and I'm like, all right, like we do a little quick warm up, something that just basically just set up the body in the water, a lot of like power drills, like head up freestyle, that type of stuff, like setting up like a good catch. We recently started using loofahs for a little. It's not too much resistance, but just enough that like you can feel the water a little better.
Wait, how do you use the loofahs?
So like as a parachute. So instead of a parachute.
Okay, as a parachute.
Loofahs, yeah.
Nice.
So it's not too much resistance, but it it gives you a little bit of like a better feeling. And then from there, I'm only counting bouts of sprints. So I'm writing one for, I think it's tomorrow. It's either tomorrow or for next week, early next week. So basically, we did it this week. So this week we did 16 bouts. So, and then I'll split that in many ways. I'll go 4 rounds of 15-yard sprints on 1:30. And then, so they go like a 15 sprint and 1:30, like with fins and paddles. So it's like 6 strokes of work, maybe like 8 strokes of work, but it's the most perfect 8 strokes they can take. And they all know at this point, like in the beginning, it was sort of like a joke. I'm like, hey, the number one rule of the sprint club, you're not breathing, you're not like, slacking. Like you're trying to go as fast as you can, trying to like up that ceiling, right? So then they go 4 15s on 1:30, 100 easy. And then for the next round of 4, we change it up. We go from a relay dive into a 3 cycles max. And just because I'm trying to generate as much speed, right? So like I go relay dive with fins, so like trying to get as fast as you can go. And then, always like a lot of rest, never less than a minute rest in between, and never more than 6 sprints in a row. So then I just play with the volume. Then I just play with, I kind of like, sometimes I give them exactly what to do. So sometimes I'll tell them like, hey, let's go 15 max, or let's go full 25 max. Let's go, a 25, a 20, a 15, and a 12.5. I play with that. Or sometimes I'll write 5 rounds and then I'll leave the 6th round unstructured. I just say, you have 4 efforts to do, do whatever you want. You just got to go fast. And the minimum is usually like 3 cycles, which is, I think it's a good distance, like puts you right about 6 to 7 seconds of work, like right on that ATP system, and then shut down. And it works. They love it. And then at the end, we always finish with something a little more fun. Like, so I just play with a variable of, for example, this week we did 16 because we're a little more tired. But next week I want to go up to like 22, between 22 and 24 efforts. Then at the end, we'll probably do like 3 25s from the block with fins for time. And then like 1 without fins at the end. We do it like relay style, or we do, a 50 underwater max, try to break, 19 seconds. So it's just like something very quick, very fast.
Yeah.
That's it. And like, I never look at yardage. Usually like I do so much rest time in between that sometimes we just have to kind of like rush to, fall within the NCAA hours, because
right.
in my perception, like if I could, I would do like 2 to 3 minutes rest in between each 15-meter interval, which is something I did myself. So like I wrote my workout yesterday was 3 rounds of 4 15s, and they're all in 2 minutes. And some of my guys were joking. They're like, dude, like you need 2 minutes for a 15-yard sprint. I'm like, well, that's the beauty of it. Like, I didn't think I need it, but the more I look at science and the more I look at stuff, I'm like, yeah, maybe like the quality increases exponentially if we're tackling these things the right way. It's just because we're so trained to look at it in one way that, we're leaving all of this money on the table over here.
Let me ask you this. One question came to mind. Like, you're working with sprinters, right? And you're talking about just top speed, reaching top speed. And certainly you have different kind of like freestyle priming drills to get them, feeling the water right and their catch set up. But a lot of yard swimming, at least with the 50 and 100s, is all about underwaters as far as watching some of the top sprinters, right? Like you think of like a Gretchen Walsh or Maggie McNeil. I'm naming some female ones, or, Caleb Dressel, Josh Leendo, Jordan Crooks. Like their underwaters are crazy fast. So how are you incorporating, if at all, just like, you talked about doing a 50 underwater, trying to get 19 at the end, but are you doing any sort of underwater work with your sprinters to try to get their tempo up? Or, some sprinters have it and some sprinters don't. So how do you kind of look at that and measure that, I guess?
So that's a great question, because I personally, I struggle with that a lot. I was never a great underwater swimmer, but I wasn't bad at all either. So I was like right in the middle. And I was racing, like when I was in college, I was racing those guys, right? Like I was the same class as Caleb Dressel, same conference, same events. So I'm watching these guys. Like if you've ever swam next to Caleb, you understand the importance of underwaters, because I've flipped 100 frees right next to him, and then like all of a sudden his feet are on your face and he's going at it, and you're like, what's going on, right? Like, and so like I definitely understand the importance. This summer though, I did a little trip around the country where I was visiting a couple of programs and kind of like exchanging ideas with different coaches. And I stopped at LSU and I was actually helping coach the LSU sprinters. I was coaching Maggie. And one thing I noticed with Maggie was from the moment she gets in the water to the end of practice, like she's working her underwaters. I think they do have like specific sets that they work on, you know, range of motion, mobility, and like speed for underwater. But just from the perspective of like her being a professional athlete, for the beginning of practice, like, you know, 300 easy, just kind of like warm up, she's going to the 15 in every wall, you know, like, and then whatever she's doing, she's going to the 15 in every single wall. And this is like long course. And that day I was like, oh, okay, like I can give you an underwater set once a week, twice a week, whatever. But if you're not actually implementing like she is, you're going to have a tough time. So then the other end of the spectrum, like last year we had a guy here at Ball State. He was a senior and he was a senior sprinter. Really bad range of motion. Could barely do like a good streamline. And it was one of those situations like he knew he was going to be done with swimming and, you know, like he struggled with like mobility. And I was like, all right, like the way I look at it is like he was really good on top of the water. That's also valid, like to say like he was amazing on top of the water. So one of the things I told him, like, whenever like 3 months out from conference, I'm like, well, you're going to be done in, you know, 12 weeks. I don't think there's enough time to do much. Like, I'll give you, like, let's work on having the best 2 dolphin kicks you can when you push off the wall. And then you get up and you start swimming, dude. Like, because I can give you an amazing progression, but like, I don't think much is going to happen, you know, within the next like 8 weeks of, you know, underwater progression, that you're going to go from doing one really bad dolphin kick to like going the whole 15 underwater. So it's like, let's just work on doing 2 really good ones, getting on top of the water and start swimming. So I don't think we do spend some time, like we do a lot of video, we do focus on like underwater training in the beginning of this season. But for my sprint sets, for example, they sort of know who has like a good underwater. And like one thing I tell them always is like, all right, let's stay legal, right? Like just because you have fins and you're only going to 15 max, I don't want you to go 15 underwater with fins and then be done. I still want you to do like 3 or 4 cycles. So if your 3 or 4 cycles mean that you're going to go the whole 25 because your underwaters are so good that you're going to come up on the 15, great. But like if not, utilize the number of underwaters that you usually do in your race. That's something that's very important. And also I tend to like every time I write, I also write like our bucket sets, everything we do, like power, resistance, like I write. And so usually like the first couple of reps that I throw in there are all underwater. And then obviously with breaststrokers, they do pullouts, but everyone else is doing underwaters in their respective stroke in order to like also work on that sort of like power through, you know, doing underwaters as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love it. I like the point that you brought about visiting the LSU program this summer, working with the sprinters and noticing how Maggie McNeil, it's not just working underwaters on a certain set or a certain, you know, designed underwater set. Like it is all the time.
Yeah, no, it's all the time. And like at the same time, like right after that, I went to NC State to work their summer camps. And Braden is notoriously known for his underwater progression. So it's like a lot of like I believe in doing something, like in having a progression, but I think depending on the crowd as well, it's something very important. Now, when I coach club, which is like younger kids, I definitely like, yes, we're doing underwater. Everyone is going to the 15. Like I just got Jake from Swim Bridge just sent me a couple of bridges I've seen those like you put it in the middle of the pool, like the kids have to go under. It's sort of like
Oh,
yeah,
I think I've seen this, but so
swim
what
bridge.
is it exactly? Describe what it is.
It's like so Swimbridge is a company founded by Jake. He coached here at Carmel, and it's basically like I don't know if it's what it's made out of. It's like PVC or like some sort of rubber.
Mhm.
So you just sort of like put it like you attach it to the lane line. You put it like whatever distance you want, and kind of forces the athlete to have to go under. I think it's a
Right,
great
right.
tool for club like can highly benefit from that. But I
Mm.
do think like once you get to college, like the athletes are a little more mature. Uh, like it's one of those things like all right, like you're 22 years old, like just go to the 12 and a half. Like if you have the
Right,
ability, don't be lazy. Just go to the 12 and a half
right,
underwriter. So,
right, right. Yeah, we shouldn't need this at that level. Yeah. No, that's very cool. Well, talk to me about your coaching at club. So that's you're coaching at Carmel. Is that right?
no, no,
The
no.
Carmel school? Oh no.
No, so I coach at a small club here in Muncie. So we live in Muncie, Indiana. We're about an hour from Indianapolis.
Okay.
We have a club. Yeah, there's a club here, Card Aquatics. It's a
Card
pretty
aquatics.
small club. It has nothing. It has no ties to Ball State. The name is the same, but it has no ties to Ball
Right.
State.
Okay.
It's just a really fun experience because then over there I get to actually explore a little more of my other side of coaching. So if at Ball State I do a lot of like sprint stuff, and that's what they have me do, like sprint, dry land, strength and conditioning. At club, completely different person.
Hmm.
Like sometimes I'll tell our coaching staff here the sets that I do with the club swimmers. They're like, "Who wrote that? Like, who are you?" Because it's like the other day I did like a 3,500 yard set with the kids, like a lot of fast average rad stuff, and they're like, really, like how to ride those sorts of workouts? I'm like, yeah, dude, like I believe those guys need that stuff.
Mm.
um Not necessarily like my top sprinter here, like I wouldn't write
Right.
that for him, but
What
uh
what age group? What age groups are you mostly working with at the club level?
high school. So
High school. Okay.
it's I say high school, but like right now, for example, I only have about 6 to 7 kids, and they're all homeschooled. So like right now it's high school season, so they all train with their high schools. So
Hmm.
sort of like my group is very small because we're a very small community here. I think the city has about 30,000 people.
Okay.
So the city, and everyone's students at Ball State. So the city's very small. So community is very small. All my kids are like homeschooled. They're not necessarily like very competitive, which is fun because I try to instigate new things with them,
Mhm.
not just like the same of like I do yardage, but I do it in a fun way. I
Right.
like to say, like I try not to like stick to like, all right, let's do 3100s best average and see what's up. I don't
Right.
do stuff like that, but yeah, like they love it. Like yesterday, and I'm also not afraid. I think that's one of the cool things, being a club coach and having full autonomy. Uh, I often see a lot of club coaches trying to cram like a lot of yardage within their 2 hour period. Like yesterday, for the last 30 minutes of practice, we just worked on breath control. And I was like, hey, we're just doing 75s. I don't care how many. I don't care if we do five or if we do 15 of them, but we're working on breath control. So I gave them like different breathing patterns. I explained, took a lot of time to explain to them the importance of, when you count your strokes, energy expenditure, understanding how much oxygen your body really needs. So it was just like more of like teaching, uh, like being a teacher than being a coach, if that makes sense. And I think that's like really cool as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I was listening to actually another Brett Hawk podcast. I've shouted him out a few times because I definitely like to listen in on some of the coaches and different swim personnel that he interviews. But there was this coach, or I think it was yeah, South African kind of
Jump
like
to,
coach.
yeah,
Yes, right.
yeah,
And he mentioned I only got halfway through, but he mentioned like he kind of sees coaching as more of teaching than actually coaching. And
right,
he mentioned something cool where he was saying, rather than thinking of coaching or teaching as coaching the swimmers, I think about coaching the swimmers' brains
right,
because that is at the end of the day sort of the basis of swimmers' ability to step up on the blocks and turn on that kind
right,
of that engine or that sort of brain to be like, hey, we need to now get into 100 mode. We need to get into 50 mode, whatever it is.
Right.
I thought that was really cool because, like, as a club coach myself, I'm constantly trying to think of, okay, as an 11, 12, 13-year-old, like, I need to be making sure that these athletes are really engaged in what we're doing. Like, I need to be teaching them, explaining things, and like you said, not just going through 3100's best average or whatever, whatever long set that won't maybe engage that part of their brain to really just embrace what they're doing and try and learn what they're doing. So I think that's really cool. What do you think, like, in your sort of opinion, what do you think are some key principles or like things that club swimmers need? And it could be dryland too, because I'm trying to figure out, I'm working with 10, 11, 12-year-olds, sort of like these middle school, pre-middle school swimmers that are sort of like the next generation of kind of like these, more high school based swimmers in a few years. So I'm trying to figure out, like, should I be doing drylands with them? Should I be implementing different looks? So I don't know, what sort of advice would you give for working with kids maybe at that age, or just club swimmers in general?
I think it's very different, like the way I grew up in Brazil and like club swimming in Brazil. So it's funny because like I get to see this like from the perspective of someone that like did something completely different than what goes on in 90% of the clubs here in America. Um, I grew up in an environment that was a little more professional. So like I left home at 13 to swim for a big club in Brazil. And from that moment on, like it was on, right? Like at 13, we're, strength and conditioning, dry land, nutritionist, psychologist, like we had everything available to us in our club, and like it was very like focused on results. And so I don't necessarily like it to where I believe that that's the only way to do it. The one thing I run a couple of clinics. Oh, that's another thing I do. I forgot to mention in the beginning. I do clinics for Fitter and Faster as well. So I'm a clinician part time on the weekends. So like when I do my clinics, that's something that's a question that I get asked a lot from the parents. Is like, should they be doing other sports, or should they be doing, when should they start dryland, and how many swim sessions a week they should go to become a good swimmer. So I'm like, honestly, like up until developmental ages like 14, 15, I highly encourage kids to be doing as much dry land stuff as possible. And the reason why is just the more athleticism you're able to build early on in those ages, the easier it's going to be for them to achieve some sort of longevity in the sport of swimming. And like, and that's not a rule, right? Like I've had friends that, my best friend in Brazil, he was a junior world record holder in the 50 back. And this guy, when he was 18, he could not hop a hurdle, like no athleticism whatsoever. But at the same time, he was breaking world records. And like we looked at, like, we would make so much fun of him because like he would like fall so many times. Like whenever we we're doing like plyometric training, he would always fall. And we're like, dude, like, how are you a world record holder and you cannot hop a hurdle? Like no athleticism whatsoever, right? Like, but at the same time, like we're all these studs being able, like I used to like squat like close to 400 pounds when I was like 14, 15. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily correlate with me swimming fast whatsoever, but it's just like, I've always been on the spectrum of like having a lot of athleticism. And like, I highly recommend that. Like, if kids can be exposed to track and field, gymnastics, like a lot of times like swimmers end up doing diving activities as well, just because close sport, like highly recommend that. I used to coach a younger group in California a couple of years ago, and they're all from 9 to 13-year-olds. And I only had an hour and a half with them every day. And what I would do was I would do 30 minutes to 40 minutes of dry land and then 40 minutes of swim. And in the beginning, like a lot of the parents are like, why are they doing so much dry land? Like, why are, my dry land wasn't like kind of like pointless stuff, right? Like everything was well thought out, like the specificity of like, but it was fun. Like I did a lot of little circuits that they had fun with it, but like at the same time they're working like different skill levels. And then on Fridays we would go a full hour of dryland and then 30 minutes of relays. And in the
Oh wow.
beginning, like a lot of parents like, why are we doing this? And then after a while, they started noticing like, oh, their start got much better. Oh, well, they're pushing off the wall looks a lot cleaner. And it's like,
Mm.
and then with time, they started understanding that the water is a completely different environment, right? Like gravity works different, like everything works different, physics works different in the water. So if you struggle to move on land where it's a little easier, how much harder is it going to be when you're in the water? And I'm telling you as a coach, hey, maybe do this with your arm, or maybe like keep your elbow high, or do that with your head. If they can do that on land, how much harder it's going to be in the water, right? Like I think it just transfer perfectly. Like the more capable you are of moving like that outside of the water, like your chances to move a little more freely and understand how your body um, perform in the water just increase. So that's my line of thinking on it. It's up until that age of like 14, 15, like try to explore athleticism. Obviously some kids are going to be a little more talented than others, and that's just normal. Some kids are going to grow a little more, and that's another thing that happens as well. It's like a lot of kids don't grow, like don't gain muscle until they're like 16, 17, 18. And when that happens, it becomes even harder for them to move. So if they have a good foundation, a good base early on,
Mm.
makes it even easier later on, right?
Yeah.
Um, because that's inevitable. Like a lot of parents in my clinics, they ask like, oh, like we can only swim 1 hour, you know, a week, or 1 hour a day, for 5 days during weekdays. I'm like, that's perfect. Like do as much as you can. Obviously, like you want to maximize that, but like if that's how much you can do, and then you can also pair that with track and field training or gymnastics training or whatever other sport it is, do so. Like just because
Mm.
like at some point they're gonna start getting more muscular, they're gonna get bigger, they're gonna get stronger, and the technique, the movement pattern is gonna change in the water anyways. So the more flexibility, mobility, like the more range of motion you have built in your base, the better off you're going to be when you get more muscular, stronger, and you gain a couple inches. So that's my
Mm.
line of thinking on it.
Yeah. No, but I appreciate it. I mean, I agree. I definitely think that, like you said, just having that foundation of how to move better on dry land, and kind of have that body awareness, have that body just, I don't know, strength and sort of connection built up, so that when your body does change inevitably at 14, 15, 16 years old, well, okay, it's going to be a new learning curve for you, but at the same time, you have a bit of a base to build off of, which puts you a step ahead of
Exactly.
some other people. So that makes sense. I also find it's funny, a lot of my club swimmers, like I have a few, like the two sports that really translate well, as another sport that they're into, is like dance and gymnasts. Like those that I have that are like ballet dancers or some sort of dance, or like are involved
Right.
in gymnastics, their body awareness and like connection, and like it is so translatable to the water. Like
It's
when I give
insane.
them a
Yeah.
drill, it's like, oh my god, I need all of you to do dance, or all
They
of you
know
to do
exactly how to
gymnastics.
move their body. And like
Exactly
I
how to
think
move the
for
body.
me it was karate. I did karate for 6 years of my life. Like that was my first sport.
Mm,
And we used to do a lot of abs, a lot of stretching,
mm,
like legitimate, like 40 minutes of stretching every day. And then like whenever I started swimming, so the way I started swimming was like me and a couple of friends from school. We were all like 7-year-olds, but within like 2, 3 months, the coaches are like, maybe we want to put you in the competition group. While the guys were still struggling to learn freestyle, I knew all four strokes. I knew everything, because like to me it was easy. I'm like, oh, like touch your toes. Yeah, I can easily touch my toes. Like I can easily like move my body freely, and these guys are struggling.
mm,
So like that was what worked for me, like karate. But I
For sure.
love track and field. I love watching track and field. I love studying track and field. I think it works, all bases when you're a track athlete as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's another great. I mean, I as a swimmer myself growing up, track and cross country running were my two other sports before I fully committed to swimming. And God, the cross training from those sports like
Right.
were so like helpful and impactful for my swimming success too. So I totally think that yeah, being an advocate for swimmers to try on just like dry land sports, or even just get active when it comes to dry lands and different strength training on the land is great. Well, cool. Well, let me ask you this. You are a big, sort of like I see you as kind of like the self starter, like kind of big promoter of your brand, yourself as a coach, and certainly that shows on your social media. Like I check out, your Instagram page, and you have nearly 20,000 followers on Instagram. You're constantly pushing out this wonderful content of the stuff that you're talking about, experimenting with the Ball State athletes, within your own training as a masters and pro swimmer, and just trying to share this kind of information with the swimming community, and so I think it's great. But like, when did this all start for you? Like, just wanting to kind of capitalize on pushing your name out there and kind of doing this whole self promotion thing, and like I checked out, you have different it seems like you have a book on like principles of coaching and being a self-starter, and then workouts that you can sign up for, and even shoulder mobility stuff and dry land. So you've really put yourself as someone who is making information accessible, and just someone who wants to really push out all of the information that you have to offer on social platforms. So like, my question is, when did this all start for you, and how do you go about really like just capitalizing on this?
Well, I think it's exactly the way you put it. It's all about sharing for me. Um, I think since an early age, like I've always worked with a couple of sponsors in my city, just because like I come from like a middle class family. We didn't necessarily have too much money to like get me traveling and doing all the swim meets. So my dad always like taught me how to like be sort of like brand friendly, like have we had a couple local business help us out financially with my travels. I always had to take pictures with a little hat here, like a t-shirt there. And so like my whole life, that's something I've always understood. And then I studied marketing and entrepreneurship in college. It kind of like opened up a little more my mind for all of that, because I started feeling like there's a lot of money being left on the table. And I don't say money like physically, like, but figuratively, like there's a lot of information that wasn't necessarily being shared in our community. And one of the pacts that I sort of made with myself as well, when I got back into swimming and like being involved in swimming and coaching, was like, hey, like I'm not the owner of the truth. I want to share and see like and exchange ideas. And sort of like it started off with like me. I made that page and I was like, all right, like let me share a couple of workouts here. So I started sharing a couple of workouts, and then I do have uh, kind of like a easiness, or sort of like I like filming videos. Like I like filming technique. I like making like some like cool videos. I don't like editing too much, and I'll say that like you guys like Kyle Sockwell, like like Kyle's editing amazing videos. Like some guys are putting out like awesome YouTube content. Like you editing the podcast, like I don't like spending time editing. So like, but I found that for myself. Like I figured it out. Like I tried and it didn't work. I couldn't put a regular like consistent schedule on it. So I was like, I started sharing workouts, and then it's started sharing an exercise here and there. And then all of a sudden I post a video of myself swimming and it did well. And then I post myself lifting and it did well. And then it sort of became this big giant thing that I'm like, all right, like last year, I think I was putting out like 3 to 4 videos a day of just like content, like all the time. Like I would like, hey, I would ask my athletes like, hey, we're doing this drill, film it, post it, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. This year I kind of like slow it down a little bit. But I think the main idea behind all of it is it's basically just kind of like sharing the information with the community, because like from where I come from, like swimming has given me a lot. Like I would not be living my dream right now of, living in the US. Like I recently applied for my green card. Just kind of like living the dream life for myself if it wasn't for swimming. So my pact with myself is just like, I want to add to this community as much as I can. And I think that goes with that promise of like always studying and like always making, always becoming better, becoming a better coach, becoming a better leader, just in order to like add and leave my mark in the sport somehow. But mostly like, it's all about just sharing and like showing people that, thinking outside of the box, it's pretty possible and it's pretty easy and fun to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I love your stuff. I think anyone who kind of puts themselves out there like that, puts their training out there, is just doing like other coaches a favor at the end of the day. Even if you might get judged or you might get some backlash, like, hey, at least you're the one who's trying to put yourself out there. You're trying to push, some helpful information for other people
Right.
to,
I
to
think it
take ideas
opens a
from. So,
lot of doors as well. I
right.
think that was like the number one thing I found um last year, was that like, everything, like all the doors that have been open to me in this past year was mainly because of like the work that I do, like the amount that I give back through social media. So I'm just very
Mm.
thankful for it. Like I pretty much like I told you, like I went around the country this summer. All I did was I DM'd a bunch of coaches and I was like, hey, I'm doing a trip. Can I stop by for a couple of days? And a
Mm.
lot of them were like big name head coaches that I never would have thought like would have given me the time of the day. But they're like, oh yeah, of course, man. Like I love your stuff. I've seen your work. Stop by. Like we'll help you out over here. So like to me that was like, oh, like, I'm being watched. So
Right.
um it came with, a lot of excitement, but as well as like some responsibility to like, all right, like now I have to do an even better job of
Mm.
not just, saying some like nonsense stuff, like, and not being able to like back it out. But it's been great so far. I've been able to connect with like amazing people. I think some of my good friends in swim coaching, I've never met them in person. Uh, I'm telling you, dude. Like,
And
especially this summer. Like this summer, I went up to do the summer camp at NC State, and I think 5 or 6 of the guys or the other coaches that were there, like we've known each other and we have exchanged information for like years, for like 2-3 years,
mm.
but we had never met in person. So like we ended up
Right.
meeting in person this year. So like that was like a pretty cool thing. Like like just kind of like I have this community of coaches that like I talk to all the time, but like not necessarily like have met them yet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel the same way. Like even through doing this podcast, I'm meeting great coaches that I've never met before in person. I'm learning from them, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, dang, I want to, at some point, I want to go around and meet these coaches. Like I want to, have that sort of face to face
Right.
connection, interaction. Because of course, it's as great as this is, connecting on socials and stuff. It's not that authentic, real feeling that you get when you're in person with someone. So.
Right.
Um,
Right.
I think there's something, special to that for sure.
For sure.
What like when you did your tour of just different places around the summer, it maybe what were like some highlights of that, or like maybe one or two coaches, or I don't know, certain aspects from that journey that like you really looked at and were like, this is something I'm going to take. Like this is something I'm gonna use, or it could have been anything you saw, or something that
Yeah.
you just really liked.
So the loofahs were like the big thing when I went down to LSU. So like we're a mid-major program here at Ball State. Don't necessarily have all the money in the world. And the way like I came up in swimming, like we're being part of like, the best sprint program in Brazil, then like being a part of LSU, which is like a top 20 program in the US. So we had money, we had equipment. So the way my brain operates is like, okay, like we just need to get this much equipment and like I can write sets with this equipment. So coaching Division II school where I started and like coaching at a mid-major Division I now, like put me on the spot to where like, okay, like maybe we don't have all the money to spend in equipment. So I have to be creative. One of the things I learned at LSU, like this summer, got to coach. I mean, amazing opportunity. Got to coach, 2 Olympic gold medalists, Brooks Corey and Maggie McNeil. And one of the things was Rick was like, hey, like, you don't need all the money in the world. Like, just buy some loofahs. Like, how many kids do you have? I'm like, oh, 50 kids. It's like 50 loofahs, it's $50. And buy a couple of strings. And we just literally bought string and loofahs like when I came back. And that's something that we've been using like all the time now. And it's such a, outside of the box thinking that like it never would have crossed my mind. And that's something that they use over there. Like every athlete has their loofah for resistance. And I'm like, oh yeah, that actually does work very well. And I would say another thing, like from one of the things that I picked up the most from NC State was like not being afraid. It's not necessarily like an equipment, but it's like I learned that a lot from Braden was just kind of like not being afraid to try out. Some of the conversations that I had with him sort of put me in a good spot for that of like, he's like, well, when I took over the program, we weren't very good. And like him and Todd pretty much built that program from the zero. And he wasn't afraid to try different things. And that's how he figured things out. And I've been taking that like very seriously, like every time like I have an outrageous idea, I'll do a lot of research and I'll exchange that idea with a couple of people. I have like a good group of like coaches that like we're really good friends that like we call all the time. So I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? And then like they'll tell me like their thoughts and like I'll bring up to my head coach and like, all right, like, let's see. But like most importantly is just like not being afraid. And I think like that has been changing a lot the way I coach this past, from the summer till now. It was one of the biggest things I took from the summer.
Yeah, no, I love it. I remember talking to Ethan Cook, just asking him a little bit about you, and he was like, "Yeah, ask Joe about his confidence because he's really confident." I was like, "That's awesome."
That's the thing. I think it comes like a lot of people ask me that. Like, it is frightening at times because I'm like, well, I'm still like a young coach as well. I don't have that much, certainty about what I do.
Right.
But that's why, like, every time I'm gonna do something, like let's say with the loofah thing, I went out. At first, I didn't just like go and buy a bunch of loofahs and try different things. At first, I went and bought 3 or 4 loofahs for myself. Then within in 1 month, I tried different types of sets, different type of work on myself to build up that confidence. So that when I when I give the loofah to my athlete, a lot of them are like, well, it's not staying very well. Well, it's kind of loose. Every time I turn, this happens. I'm like, you have no saying in this because I've used it. I know
I've done it.
Like I know when you're like, when you have a point or when you don't. And kind of like the same thing with other coaches. Like I do get asked a lot, like, what about this or like the training methodology or like an idea. And like the reason I sort of like protect myself with confidence is through studying, right? Like, I'm not a huge science guy, but like I do my due diligence. And like the biggest problem in swimming, I think, is that most coaches don't. They just sort of like, oh, that's how I learn, and like that's what I'm gonna do. And so they end up missing the whole point, So like then that confidence that sometimes might be seen as like a little bit of like arrogance at points. It's like, no, it's backed out by, studying, exposure to it, trying, failing, like knowing exactly like what's happening. So
yeah. Yeah, I heard someone say like you only know as much as you know, and a lot
Exactly.
of coaches just like to be in control, right? Like they like to
Exactly.
have that control, like to feel like they, are imparting the right tools for their swimmers. But I think that's often where, some vulnerabilities lie because it's like, hey, there is always more to be learned. There's always more to study. So I think that's awesome. Yeah. Um, well, I'll wrap it up here in just a few more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. But one of my questions that I wanted to ask you is just like, you're coaching, you're swimming, you're very much living this passion of yours in the sport of swimming. So like where do you see yourself, come 2, 3, even 5 years down the line? Like is your vision to, be a college coach, a head coach of your own program someday, or just remain in the US and do some professional coaching? Like do you have sort of a vision for, where you hope to go and who you hope to coach and inspire?
Yeah, yeah. Well, hopefully in the US, I just spent a lot of money on my green card application, so fingers
Right.
crossed it works out.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I definitely want to stay in swimming coaching. I don't necessarily see myself as a head coach as of right now, to be honest. My number one goal when I came back to the sport was to make it to an Olympic game as a coach. So my kind of like goal right now is being positioning myself in a way that I'll be able to coach an Olympic swimmer throughout their Olympic development and like go to the Olympic games, because that's what I grew up knowing.
Mm,
From I was 12 years old when Phelps got 8 gold medals and Cesar Cielo, my Brazilian teammate, won the first Olympic gold for Brazil. So got bit by the bug, and since then, like that has been the pursuit. It's just achieving that would mean a lot to me. But uh, at the end of the day, like I think like the more I do swim clinics, the more I really like that end of the things as well, like sort of like the developmental and like the sharing, like pretty much like having the kids getting bit by the bug as well, and like trying to like uh motivate the next generation of swimmers. So I really like that end of the spectrum as well. So I think I'm still learning, like I'm still like very eager to learn. I don't see myself taking over any head coaching positions anytime soon, or any necessarily like assistant with too much responsibility anytime soon. I want to be the guy who's flexible enough to go around and learn from everyone.
mm,
So
yeah.
I think that's why I try to focus on my brand a lot, just because uh, I don't want to be too attached necessarily to a university, like as
Right.
an assistant coach or as a head coach. I think there's more to
Yeah.
be explored. So I sort of like try to invest in myself, and that's something that I learned from my college coach, Steve Meller. Uh, it's like the investment that you make in yourself. It's always going to be the best one. So
Mm,
that's something that I try to do, is sort of like like this summer when I went around, like I was paying out of pocket for everything. No one's paid for it, so I started to put some money aside, and I'm a GA, man. Like I don't make too much money. So like I put some money aside, like was able to put together some money, and like just went around the country to learn, just because um that's what I see myself doing. It's just like I'm very business oriented, so like that's why I have a lot of products out. Like I try to help, but like I also have to be able to survive. So like
of
I do
course.
have my online athletes. I do have like my clinics that I do. Um, to be able to like put together my financials, but at the end of the day, it's I think um, I'm closer to the end of the spectrum where I focus as sort of like a, I don't know if that's a thing in America, but like kind of like what I'm just a coach. Not necessarily tied to any clubs or not necessarily
tied to it.
To any universities. I'm just a guy trying to share and trying to have fun with it.
Yeah. No, but I think that's great because I mean, you got to have an idea of what you're looking for. And like you said, if you get involved with a university or college, even a club, and you try to climb the ranks that way, then you're dependent on, that, right? Like you're getting paid by that college or university, or you're getting paid by that club or organization. And, for a lot of people that works, but a lot of times, especially at the head coaching level, you're going to do a lot less coaching than you want to, right? So it's
Exactly,
like,
and that's what I don't, I don't want to be that type of administrator. Like, the one thing I'll tell you what, like the one thing that I find very difficult in coaching in college is the recruiting process. Just because it takes so much time, and you're trying to sell someone an idea, and it's amazing. It's great, right? Like I was recruited to LSU and ended up going there, but at the end of the day, like as soon as I got to LSU, within the first week, the coach that spent 2 years recruiting me left for another job.
Right.
So that to me, it's the toughest part about college coaching. It's just because like we're only humans, and we're trying to become better and like provide for our families as well. But at the end of the day, I'm like, well, like I don't want to try to sell a drink to a kid and then like a better job opportunity opens up and then I move there. So I just think it's very unfair to the kids. So that's why I try to like be careful with that.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's a great point too. Like that's a whole nother job in and of itself, is the selling, sort of the what I call like the sales, sort of aspect of, collegiate coaches and coaching. So for sure, it takes time and a lot of effort, and investment, but yeah, for sure. It's that you got to know what you want, right? You got to know what you're looking for, and you're betting on yourself. And like you said, like that piece of advice that your college coach gave you, the best investment you'll make is on yourself. I definitely agree with that. And you're doing a great job of it. So I think if you have that vision, that's going to be the best thing for you, and just striving towards that. So that's great. All right. Last question. I just wanted to ask if you are a fan of get out swims, or a get out swim, a call out swim. I've heard people call it a different, a different term. And if so, if you have any favorite kind of get out swims, get on the blocks, whatever it is.
So I'm a fan, definitely. As long as it has some like it's well thought out, right? Like there's always especially like being a sprinter my whole life, being around sprinters and coaching some sprinters, like they always try to like, come up with a deal that's not fair. Or that doesn't make sense. One thing I always joke with my guys here, it's like they're every time they come up with like, hey, like if I go this fast right now, can everyone be done? I'm like, like you can be done right now, like the door is over there, like you're 20 years old, like I'm not your dad, you can leave if you want, if you don't want to do the work. And then they just get like, oh, we're joking, man, we're joking. And I'm like, no, I know. But it's like, it doesn't make sense. Just because you're feeling amazing right now, you want to go a 9.325 freestyle and get out, like that's not going to do anything. So I do like have some things that like I'm like, all right, like in college we used to do this a lot. It used to be like legitimately like, hey, this and this person, everyone has to hit it, a 100 for, and like our coach would give us time, but it wasn't like my best time was like 44 low. It would be like, all right, like you got to go like a 45-0, and like the other people as well, like it was just as hard. And then everyone can get out. But I do it in club. I do it in club a lot.
Club is a great place to do it.
Yeah, I try to avoid it with the college guys because they already don't do too much. Like we're in the very short end of things, especially the sprinters. Like they only like double twice a week, which is already like I'm already like giving them a lot of like break. So I'm like, no, we're not doing get out swims. We did one very often not too long ago. I think it was just a men's practice. It was really fun actually. It was like just men's. And you know how boys will be boys, just get rowdy. And our best swimmer, he's a 100 breaststroker, he's a 52-1 breaststroke. he goes, well, like if I do this, we had like a couple of more efforts, and he's like, if I break the pool record right now, which was like a 55 something, it's like if I go the pool record right now, everybody's done. And I shouldn't have done this because I'm a grad assistant, but I was like, yeah, deal. And then like all the guys got crazy. All the guys are, oh, let's go. But then our head coach came in and he's like, what's happening? I'm like, well, like, I don't know if I should have called this decision. Like, I don't know like how bad he wanted them to have finished the set. But I was like, I told them they could be done. And then our head coach is like, all right, like, but like I was kind of afraid because I was like, oh, dude, I made a decision that maybe wasn't up to me.
Right.
I like it. I love it, man. Yes.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, João, thanks for hopping on and chopping it up with me. I have a bunch of other questions I want to ask you, so hopefully we can stay in touch. And you know, I'll keep following you on your socials, and yeah, hopefully one day we can meet up in person.
100%, man. Yes.
Yeah,
No, thank you.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much for sure. Like, I think this is awesome. I think you're doing what we're talking about in your own way. Like, I've had a lot of people ask me to do, you know, create my own podcast. I just can't. Like, it's not my form of, you know, like medium. It's not what I am savvy for doing. But I highly appreciate people that do it because I listen to podcasts all the time. Big Joe Rogan guy, you know,
Yep.
Andrew Huberman, you know, all the bros podcasts, but also like the swimming ones. Like I love the Social Kick guys. I love Brad. I love like, you know, everything that's been going on like in the swimming community. I love people that share information. So I highly appreciate you doing this, and I'm excited to see you growing as well.
Definitely. All right. Well, yeah. Well, thanks again, and you're part of this growth, and again, I appreciate it. So,
Awesome.
thanks, João.